Hi Toby.
Hello Ricky.
Thank you for joining us today as we do a spotlight on housing and focusing on how safe do you feel in your home.
Well, thank you very much for having me.
Well, before we get started, if you can just introduce yourself, your job title and what you do at the Cornwall Borough Council, please.
So my name is Toby Gilden. I am the Safe Homes Manager and I'm part of our team that look at the statutory compliance and safety within our housing assets.
Brilliant. Thanks Toby, and again thanks for joining us today. I've got a few questions for you. Nothing to trip you up, don't worry. This is my background obviously. So, over the last few years there's been a lot of new legislation around building safety. How has that changed the way we work and our overall approach to keeping residents safe in their homes?
The introduction of the new legislation has fundamentally changed our approach to building safety. We've always had a good foundation in our approach, and we haven't just treated compliance and legislation as a tick box exercise. As an organisation, that's been our approach. I think with the introduction of the Building Safety Act and the associated legislation, that's seen probably the biggest change or the largest introduction of legislation within the housing sector for decades. The new rules and the new legislative approach has introduced an entire new way of working across the industry. Our approach has had to become more structured, more transparent, and more data-led. And fundamentally, we need to be much more accountable. For high-risk buildings, we now need to understand our buildings in so much more detail than we ever have before. We have to demonstrate how risks are being managed, and we need to be able to evidence at any point the process that we're currently going through to manage the risk and the tolerability of the risk. We've had to update our policies, our procedures, our cyclical inspection regimes, not only to meet the legislative requirements, but also to set industry best practice. We've had to become much clearer about roles and responsibilities and decision making throughout the entire hierarchy of the organisation. I think the most important thing to note is, as an organisation, we haven't treated this legislation as a ceiling. This isn't the minimum requirement for us to be compliant. We've used this legislation to set our minimum standards. Our aim is to go so much further than just simply compliance. And I think fundamentally our mission is for us as an organisation to become the exemplar within our industry and building safety. It's not what we have to do, so much of what we do is what we think is the right thing to do.
Excellent, thank you Toby. I think it's very aspirational and where we want to be as an organisation, and I suppose as an additional question, the Building Safety Act has not always been perfect in its application, and that's one of the challenges we face in an organisation. But have we had to increase our resource to meet the requirements of the Building Safety Act?
We've definitely had to increase our resource. I think probably the largest challenge, the biggest challenge that we've faced has been the introduction of the Building Safety Regulator, and how with many of our buildings the Building Safety Regulator has assumed the role of building control. And I think that the construction industry over the many decades has become complacent in many ways, and the level of scrutiny that the Building Safety Regulator is now putting us as landlords under is higher than it's ever been before. And as such, the consultants that we need to work with, the level of specifications that we need to produce for our supply chains has become so much more thorough and so much more robust and fundamentally better for our residents. So the level of resource has been significant, and fortunately the organisation has responded positively to that.
Excellent, thank you Toby. So what sort of inspections do you actually carry out to make sure residents are safe? Are there regular or cyclical checks happening within our buildings?
There are so many checks. that go on within our buildings. And I often refer to it as a bit of an iceberg. So many residents will often see the gas engineer on their annual gas inspection, or an electrician on their 5-yearly inspection, and that's just the tip of the iceberg. They're the inspections that are visible and everyone can see. But in the background, we have so many inspections taking place to ensure the safety of our residents. We have our fire door inspections, we have lift inspections, we have cyclical communal area inspections from different teams as well. So tenancy management might be looking at certain things, our compliance officers might be looking at another thing, and essentially we're having this huge amount of work going on in the background that many residents aren't even aware of. Some of these happen weekly, some of these happen quarterly, some of these happen annually. Sometimes it's on a risk-based approach. So when we know that we've had fly tipping in an area, we'll increase the frequency of inspections to make sure that moving forwards we can manage that and reduce the impact. And I think one of our challenges as an organisation is that residents don't see all of that work. And if they don't see that, they don't appreciate the level of work that goes into that, and they then don't necessarily feel the impact of that. That's something that we're really trying to improve, making sure that residents understand all of the work that is going on to keep them safe, and hopefully that will contribute towards making them feel safe.
Lead on to the next question is actually how do then we communicate that with our residents? So how do you let residents know about all of this? How do you communicate what's happening and what you're doing to keep them safe?
We use a range of different methods to engage with our residents. This includes regular safety communications, posters, notifications in communal areas. We send letters, digital messages, and we also have information shared through our online platforms. We've also built building safety information directly into our new home starter packs. So when someone moves into a new property, we have a range of different comms that we've worked together with the new build team, with our tenancy teams, to ensure that all of the residents have the relevant information at the point of use. Behind the scenes, we're using different softwares to send targeted messages. We can pick a block that's been affected by a particular issue and send all of the residents in that block a specific message. We also have digital notice boards going out into some of our high-rise blocks. They will have seasonal information, importance of fire safety, what to do in the event of a fire, how to test your smoke alarms. We will send things out on Christmas, firework safety, for example. And this approach helps us make sure that the right information is going to the right people at the right time. That being said, and despite the amount of work that we've done over the last few years, we know that we can do better, and we're actively working to do better. We know that we need to understand our residents more, how they want to be communicated with, how they prefer to receive their information, what's useful, what isn't useful, what works, what doesn't work. And we do need to tailor our messages to those individuals to make sure that the message lands appropriately. We know that we do a lot, and we're not complacent. And engagement isn't just a one-off exercise. It isn't a gazebo outside the front of a building with a cup of juice. It's ongoing, it's two-way communication. And it's something that we need to keep evolving. It's something that as a whole organisation we need to keep working on. I think the core message is our goal and our aim is to work with residents rather than doing things to residents. We need to make sure that they feel informed, confident and reassured about the safety in their homes.
That's great, Toby, and obviously empowerment is a big part of that as well. And it's been a similar theme across all the staff we've spoken to today. Is around that importance of cross-departmental working.
Absolutely.
And with external agencies as well. And I know you've really worked on your relationship with Hertfordshire Fire Rescue Service. And yeah, if you can just touch on the building safety is a joint responsibility and how important collaboration is in achieving that?
Collaboration is absolutely key, and I think we'll start off with internal cross-departmental collaboration. Within our organisation, we have the answer, and in many instances that will be within one team, and we struggle to share that information. And I think more and more with cross-departmental working groups, we are starting to understand the importance, the necessity of a cross-departmental approach. And definitely in my time over the last 2 years, I've seen that improve astronomically. The cross-departmental relationships, the sharing of information, but also the willingness to help has been fantastic. And I think long term that's only going to be beneficial for our residents. Externally, we have had a big drive to work more collaboratively with the Hertfordshire Fire and Rescue Service. We're acutely aware that in the event of an emergency and in the event of a fire, they're the teams that are running into our buildings to save our residents. And I think our key drive has been to make sure that operationally we can do everything we possibly can to make their job as easy as possible. And they've recognised that, and they've been incredibly grateful for that. So moving forwards, when we need help, when we need guidance, when we need assistance, they're always there, and they have been there to give us that help.
Now that's brilliant. And one final point from me, how do you see technology and innovation playing a part in our roles in keeping our residents safe?
So much of what we do requires data. I think the introduction of the Building Safety Act and the concept of the golden thread has put a huge responsibility on housing providers to ensure that the data that they hold is accurate and easily accessible at the point of use. And I think the use of technology in an innovative way is absolutely going to be the core driver for success with our approach to building safety. And a perfect example of that is something that we use in many of our homes. We've got it in, I think, around 6,000 properties now, is our ACO gateway. With our ACO gateway, we can have fire alarms, smoke alarms, and environmental sensors. And with the introduction of AWAB's law last October and the focus on damp and mould, we were in such a fortunate position to already have half of our housing stock already equipped with an ACO gateway, which meant that we were immediately able to install environmental sensors where required. And the data that we can get from those environmental sensors give us targeted, data-led remedial actions. A prime example is a case that we're dealing with at the moment. We can identify the north-facing bedroom is suffering from damp and mould, and using that data we can have a targeted intervention to install additional ventilation within that room. And even better than that, we can prove using the data that that intervention has been successful.
Thank you very much for your time today and your passion as always.
Thank you very much.